It's streaming, but don't think it's connected yet. What is it doing?
What's going on?
Oh wow, okay. I think we're live. Has it kicked off yet? Yes, we are live. Right, okay. that took a second there. Sorry. Ladies and gents. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, due to what we can only assume is a catastrophically unfortunate chain of events brought on by substandard decision making on your part, you have landed here on episode 28 of Thompsin and Other Disappointments. My guest this week is a returning favourite from those other social media platforms, Twitter and TikTok, and brings with her a uniquely accessible flavour of political rage and creative swearing. And after a short break in which we both could have fucking died, me battling the Johnson variant, she carbon monoxide poisoning, we are both back up in this motherfucker. And by we, I mean me and my guest, Super Tanskiii. And by this motherfucker, I mean my shed. Tan, welcome back.
Hello. I'm still standing.
You are?
Yeah.
How are you feeling? Are you all recovered?
Well, my cognitive capacity is poor, but...
Right. Well, you are on the right show then.
I was going to say, no, it's recovering. I'm okay. This kind of thing either kills you or it doesn't. So
yes, yeah. I felt the same about my dirty vid episode.
Your dirty bid?
Vid. COVID.
Oh!
My dirty bid. What the fuck? What did you think
I
of?
was like, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
On eBay? Like, Jesus.
Yeah. No, I felt the same. I felt like to begin with, when I started going downhill, I was like, okay, this could get really bad. Like, when you sort of start going through the motions in your brain, you're like, have I got life insurance? Should I have got my affairs in order before this? And
well, you have significantly more responsibilities than me. I was just like, will I make it through the day? But you've got things to worry about.
Yeah. Well, like you start sort of projecting for like a sort of final destination thing where you look at what's coming in a week and a month, and it wasn't helped by the fact that I've said on this podcast on a previous episode, like, it's all a bit fucked up at the like I could be fucking dead in like 2 months, and I just know that someone had like clipped that, and then put it on TikTok. They'd be like, look at this guy, he said that, I don't know, there's just something icky about it.
That does go through your head like all the other time. And I was thinking, because there's so many times that I've joked that MI5 are going to Princess Diana me.
Yeah.
I'd love it if like afterwards, if like 5 people that gave a shit would be like, oh, was she taken out by MI5?
Yeah.
Because conspiracy's fact nowadays, apparently, isn't it?
Well, I did wonder earlier. I was thinking, she's getting kind of big on Twitter now, kind of big on TikTok, and all of a sudden...
it is a fear.
Yeah,
it is a fear, but then you wonder if you're just being immensely paranoid. But I wouldn't put it past them.
No. But do you think, like, whenever I think stuff like that, I think, is this just my fucking ego coming? Is it just like...
Absolutely. It's like, oh God, they've taken me out at the height of my celebrity.
Yeah.
I've got no celebrity.
Or you sort of tell yourself, you're like, I mean, if they were going to take the huge risk of being outed as assassins, would they really do it to snuff out little old Thompson in his shed or Super Tanskiii? I don't know if they would.
Window seat, yeah. Right. I don't think so. But I do sometimes wonder if they watch these, if politicians watch the political TikToks.
Do you think?
I wonder, like, if they do. I don't know if they do. I doubt it, but it'd be really funny if they did. Stroke scary.
I think Chinese politicians watch TikToks, don't they? It's like, isn't it state owned, or am I talking out my arse? I feel like it's state owned.
No idea. I don't think it would be state owned.
No,
it's a bit too. Well, it's not particularly free. It's just manned by robots, isn't it? TikTok.
Is it? I know.
Well, yeah.
Dick one about like what goes on behind the scenes. I just know if I put a thing and use these hashtags, then it seems to go all right. But
well, there's shit, if any, moderation. So I think that it's mostly AI picking up keywords, flagging up images.
Yeah.
They've said that like very few people actually work for TikTok.
Yeah.
It's algorithms. It's kind of AI style moderation. I think I might be talking absolute bollocks saying that, but I think that's it. I don't know.
It does explain why when you upload a video that's about, let's say, for example, it's me talking about like anti-vaxxers or whatever, as I have done this week, and then the comment section turns into a fucking dumpster fire, and I know that there's going to be one or two people in there who take offense to me, let's say, like, lightheartedly, you know, jabbing them a bit. But and maybe then they report the video, and the video gets automatically taken down. Like, that sort of automation is what you're talking about, right? Yeah.
Anything about vaccinations or COVID
Yeah.
has virtually the same response. Like, I know there's people that work, there's like certain profiles that just follow loads, and then they get other followers to kind of mass report people they don't like.
Right.
And I've had that before. But as you say, the anti-vax stuff is particularly sinister. But it's very similar to Brexit, you know, the standard. But some of the threats that I've had from asking people to get vaccinated or suggesting people might, you know, should just get vaccinated has been off the charts. The worst I've had to date.
Yeah, it is. Like, there's a definite overlap there with the sort of, and whenever I highlight this, people get very upset that you're drawing the parallel between them. But there is a definite overlap with anti-vax and being super staunchly pro-Brexit. I don't know what it is, and I'm sure it's not.
Oh, it's a Venn diagram of country, definitely. Like, it's essentially people that are not necessarily very informed, but are desperate to be a part of something. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Stroke scared. Some people are scared. Fair enough. That's fine to an extent. But it is a lot of ignorance, a lot of not understanding, therefore kind of making it a common enemy, I think, perhaps.
I read a tweet yesterday from her name escapes me now, but it was from a Guardian journalist, I think, and she posted these pictures of WhatsApp conversations with her father, and she was like, can anybody give me some advice or guidance as to how I'm supposed to handle this situation with my dad? But basically it was like, he was just blinkered, just tunnel visioned about the risks of COVID, and he had previously suffered some sort of health issue, and so she was, you know, like hysterically worried that he was gonna succumb to this. And his attitude to it, like, she was posting him, you know, news articles saying fit and healthy 40-year-old with no previous health issues dead from COVID, and she's like, does this sound familiar? You know, does this remind you of anyone? And because the guy had sort of dismissed risk and dismissed warnings about it, and his attitude was like, nah, sounds like a weakling, you know, like, it's this complete abandonment of common sense and personal risk, because my gut feel is that people love the ego strokey nature of being able to be a bit of a strong man, a bit of a hard man about it, like, you know,
well, the dark side of masculinity, isn't it? In some senses, like the guys who are kind of like, oh, you're not a real man unless you eat a really hot chili, you know, or grow a full beard, you know, that kind of attitude. But
it's like, it's if you had a full, like, if you ate a chili, that's you're gonna sweat a lot and you're gonna beg for some sort of yogurt drink and shit
milk,
yourself.
Get your milk in you.
But like, that's a bad night, but you'll get over it, right? But for something like COVID, like, I would imagine that. And I did a TikTok about this yesterday, about how your ego should kind of kick in and go like, well, hang on a second. You know, I love to talk it up. I love to be the big man and say, oh, you know, my immune system's fucking second to none. I can fight that shit off. I can fight off a nasty cold, you know, that. Yeah. But then your ego should kick in and go like, well, now that I've said all that shit, if I do get it and I die, how many hundreds of thousands of people are going to laugh at me and like post my picture on Reddit forums and tweet about how much of an idiot
exactly.
Like, that's what kicks in with me. I'm like, I don't ever want to be the guy that people laugh at his stupid death, you know?
Well, people are thinking like that. I mean, the thing is, I've made a few videos and I know it's not necessarily always helpful to call people idiots, but sometimes when you've been making videos like this for a while and you're immersed in it, you get the fear, the anger, you get to a point where you're just so fed up with it that you might lash out and go, oh, they're all wankers. That's the problem. But I've not felt anything but immense sadness reading the stories of people that have left behind kids and
Yeah.
that have died from avoidable deaths. Like, I'm not out to mock it. I think anyone that mocks people like that who have died as a consequence is twatty. But at the same time, you know, that should be enough of a warning call to people. But it's like, you know, it's we're living in a post-truth era, aren't we? I mean, facts are not being absorbed. You know, Gove started all that, didn't he? With the, you know, we don't believe experts thing to justify Brexit, and all the facts that they called Project Fear, etc. Which is probably why I think there's a lot of Brexity folks that are anti-vax. I think it's a
and in
correlation between those.
In that sense, it takes quite strong character, I think, to not go low in those exchanges, because like both you and I know from the comment sections on various videos that things can take an ugly turn very quickly, and I find that I get an awful lot of abuse before the conversation even really gets going. Like, it would be easier to empathize and to have sympathy and to not be twatty about people who end up on Reddit forums if they weren't so fucking deliriously, deliciously happy about their side of the argument before. Like, it's like if I put up a video about, like, you know, I really think it's important that as many people get jabbed as possible to provide some sort of protection on a societal level, blah blah blah, within seconds
that's how it works.
I will get comments from people saying like, you fucking sheep, you're gonna get side effects in 2 years and your kids will be fatherless, like shitty comments like that, and then I'm supposed to be the bigger person after
exactly that. And you know, I'd like to borrow their fucking crystal ball that tells us all this stuff, because it's just like, well, if you're saying that this is going to definitely happen in 2 years' time, how do you not know that in 2 years' time we're not going to have vaccinated people and we're going to have it reduced to something that's no more than like some kind of like flu-like yearly booster thing? Like, how?
Right.
What? Because there's no factual basis. It's just like people go, oh, what about Labour? It's just whataboutism. That's a pandemic. Idiocy is a pandemic at the moment.
It's like that guy's tweet, or maybe the tweet was a quote of something, I don't know, like where they said we're battling two pandemics, like one of COVID and one of stupidity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your gut feel for how fucked we are now with COVID?
Well, this is the thing. Like, I don't like to have any form of conclusive opinion on it because I am not an epidemiologist or a virologist, or you know, so I try to kind of be led by the people that, you know, have dedicated their lives to saving people, to research. But I don't know. I mean, we're still at a point where it could go either way. What is it, 18 months in? It's just long COVID has taken on a whole different meaning, isn't it? It's like it's long COVID the illness and long COVID the shit film that just won't end. But it's just not ceasing. It depends really on whether or not we get any new variants, because there's always been the risk, isn't there, of a variant coming out that will trump the vaccines. So that's a concern.
That seems to be the sort of sticking concern across, like, all of the last, well, since they announced that the vaccines were approved and ready to go out, and then it was a case of like, yeah, well, I mean, these could be dished out and distributed up and down the land, but what happens if a variant comes out that evades vaccines within, you know, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? Then how many, like, how long could you keep that $1 billion initiative of putting jabs in arms into what are we now, 65 million people in the UK? How long do you think we could keep that going for?
Well, they'd have to like tweak it, because a lot of people are like, oh, it came out so quick, not realizing that SARS has been around for fucking ages anyway. Like, it's been around for ages. So they were literally tweaking it, and they're like, oh, how did it happen so quickly? Because the whole world were working on this thing at the same time. That's why. But I don't know if it's going to end up in another relentless cycle. But I know definitely that the thing that doesn't aid it is just letting everyone run loose. Because Johnson, as is tradition, is just gambling with us, as he gambled with Brexit, as he, you know, he's just gambling with our lives at this point. Looks like it's paying off, what he's done. But I will be livid if he comes out smelling of roses when he has essentially played high stakes poker with millions of people's lives. Like that would be,
yeah, it would be the right
enraging.
result for the wrong reason kind of territory, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I had a theory that the reason why he went down the let her rip route was because they knew that they had at that stage a shortage of Pfizer, and they couldn't give AstraZeneca to under 40s any longer.
No.
So the only real way, the only pathway that they had to achieving something close to herd immunity was to just open everything up and then let all the kids go clubbing for 3 months and get infected and build up immunity that way. And I've yet to read anything that tells me that I wasn't bang on the money. Like, I'm not trying to sound like some sort of, crystal ball guy myself, but that, to me, that makes a lot of sense. And it doesn't even seem like a complicated answer or reason for it. So I'm surprised that it hasn't become the sort of media or tabloid narrative. But
well, it's all the things they're doing are transparent, but they're not becoming a media or tabloid narrative because the government don't want it to be. It's as simple as that. I mean, they're essentially running that. And if they, now it's getting to the point where if they put out anything that the government don't necessarily want them to, that the government are trying to change the Official Secrets Act to get them jailed. So
yeah, we're
our press freedom's always been shit without that. I mean, they didn't even need to do that, really.
Yeah, that's the mystery of it, isn't it? It's like we have the most compliant media, I think, in the world. I mean, I'm sure somebody in the comment section will correct me on that, and there's some far from
North Korea.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it feels like thanks.
Sorry. I'm stitching you up.
Immediately pissing on my chips. Yeah, thanks for that.
Sorry.
I can be held to account. It's fine. But it does feel like we've got very compliant media, and there's a definite case to be made that why do you need to threaten people with 14-year prison sentences when, in case they embarrass you, when just look around, man. Like, it doesn't feel like you're under any immediate threat of being held to account or being embarrassed.
Well, it's to crack down on whistleblowers, isn't it? Essentially, like the kind of people that unleashed what happened with old Hancock. I could call it Wanksock.
Yeah.
Hancock. It's that kind of thing. I think it's trying to avoid that level of leakage.
It's so weird and shady, though, isn't it? Like, if you think back to that whole that week or 2 weeks of scandal.
I try not to think about the vision of it because it's so.
We've all tried to block it out of our minds, haven't we? But from a political scandal and media perspective, it just doesn't quite add up to me. Like, the idea that we are now rewriting a law to punish whistleblowers / journalists for embarrassing the government because they were so incensed about the Hancock revelations, when the Hancock revelations were published by the political editor of The Sun, and the political editor of The Sun is like Bezzy buds with Boris's wife. So to me, it makes more sense that Boris and his wife needed to get rid of Hancock to reopen everything, to achieve that goal. They effectively greenlit this scandal. So there's something else there. There's some other thing that they're worried about, or something that, I don't know, like it feels like they're trying to fix a different problem, and actually we're all looking at the dead cat, which is Hancock getting his end away. And there's something else on the periphery, is how it feels to me,
No, I agree. So I definitely think it was a setup, because obviously Johnson's wife likes Javid, and Javid took an immediately more kind of firm, hard line than Hancock with the restrictions. It's funny how that happened. So maybe they're using the suggestion that someone else set up Hancock as a way to push through more punitive measures for journalists.
Yeah.
It could be a multifaceted kind of plan in that sense.
Yeah.
So they set up Hancock, made it look like it was an outsider, and then because they obviously want more control over the media, because it's the kind of Trumpian playbook bullshit, isn't it?
Yeah.
That they then say, well, to stop people doing this again, we're going to have to do this. So it's kind of like justifying their future kind of quite authoritarian measures, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's a theory. I don't know.
No. Maybe.
But I don't think that doesn't add up.
No, that makes sense.
You seem uncertain. You're like,
No, I was just thinking, like, I'd completely forgotten that Carrie was, like, not BFFs, but, like, good friends with Sajid. I'm calling them all, like, by their first name as though I fucking know them. I don't.
Yeah, but I try to avoid calling Johnson Boris. I'll call him anything but Boris.
Yeah, I've noticed that, sometimes quite creatively.
Well, yeah, but I've stopped calling him Fred West because, as I say, Fred West was good at his job. He killed fewer people.
Yeah.
And we know how many kids he had. So there's no point. There's no point calling him West anymore. But yeah, it seems to be this whole weird thing. And then old mad Dominic Cummings, who has gone. Like, I was excited about that. I was thinking, Dominic Cummings. He's turned over a new leaf. He's going to bring down the government.
Yeah.
And now he's just descended into what I would have referred to as him just like essentially just wanking in front of a mirror now, talking about Free Britney, pissing off all the the Remainers, continuing to gloat about it.
Yeah.
Whilst all the time saying he doesn't know if it's a good idea. Like, I thought that was going to be a thing, but he talks a lot about how Carrie Johnson is behind the scenes pulling a lot of strings, has a lot of influence essentially over what's happening.
Yeah, so he paints a picture, doesn't he, of a sort of reactive prime minister who goes in and checks the newspapers, forms policy or forms his slogans for that day based around what he's read in the newspapers that morning. Which is, I always think that's probably the most concerning element of his lack of leadership, if you like, is the fact that he's then reacting to a columnist's take on things. And a columnist is someone who sits in Fleet Street or works from home and writes out 500 or 1,000 words based on something, but they don't have access to the information that the Prime Minister does. It's the Prime Minister's job to accumulate data, to take advice from this cabinet secretary of this industry or that one over there, and then to get together and then they all make a decision, blah blah blah. It's a total vacuum of leadership to walk into your office in number 10, read a columnist's take on things, and then to go, oh shit, like Alison Pearson says that I've fucked up with this. Well, that's today's job, guys. Let's go. I know, it's so backwards, isn't it? It's like the opposite of what should happen, because they're using the opinion of someone that's not immersed in government to run government. It's just like, what the fuck? But he also runs very solidly on opinion polls because he's obsessed with being popular. So, like, look at the foreign aid debacle. I mean, signing the death warrant to millions of people just because the polls look like... and also I think a lot of the people, because he's encouraged so much xenophobia and racism in this country, the people will just look at foreign aid and go, oh no, don't want anything foreign. Like, he's essentially acting on pure ego, just wanting to remain popular, because that's what his entire thing is. It's branding. He's built a brand of someone that's likable, someone that's like, oh, bit of a buffoon. And so that's why popularity is pushing him. But my concern is what happens when he goes. Either they'll crumble because he was the person that won over people against their better instincts, or it will just be some kind of terrifying Patel, Raab hellscape. I sort of sit in two camps with this, in the sense that we are very fortunate that in Britain at the moment, touch wood, the Conservative Party, I don't think is totally self-identifying in the same way, to the same extent that the Republican Party are in the US. I think the Republican, if you follow Chris Cuomo, the CNN guy, and he calls the Republicans the Retrumplicans, I think, because it has essentially become the party of the Trump family. And if you speak out against the Trumps, then you are ostracized from various committees and various decision making, blah blah blah. I don't think we've quite got to that extent yet with the Tories, although obviously Boris Johnson is a huge personality, yeah, and yet. But I think if he stepped down and somebody like Patel or Gove or Javid went for the PM role, I don't know if they would get the same support out of the Sun and the Express. I think there would be I hope, I pray that it would be the beginning of the end of this era of Tory leadership. I could be wrong. I don't have a crystal ball.
Is, I don't think, likable to any human or animal. Is inherently weird. The thing is with people like Patel and Raab, they are to some extent physically attractive to some extent, and people tend to automatically, there's like been studies about, I think we've spoken about this before, where people trust good looking people.
Sure.
And I wouldn't say they're like overwhelmingly good. I mean, Raab looks a bit like a budget Bond villain. So,
yeah.
You know, except without a cat, because, you know, not even animals probably trust him. But
yeah,
he's got that vibe about him.
He's got an NDA about him, is what he's got.
A what?
An NDA.
Yeah. Yeah. But he's definitely, I don't know, he's more henchman territory. Well, that's what he is at the moment. But
yeah,
that's my fear, is that someone like that will get in. But I don't know. They're not going to have the Boris allure unless they go out and, you know, assault some kids on a football field whilst playing rugby, or get stuck on a zip wire, you know, and do the whole, he's so funny.
Yeah.
Act.
Well, the thing you're not factoring in with the, so I agree. It doesn't surprise me at all that people do trust people who are traditionally speaking good looking, right? So somebody like Patel or Raab, I agree, probably quite easy on the eye, but you can be good looking and not likable. And I think both of those two suffer from they sit in that little corner of good looking people where it's like, wow, she's really hot, but she looks like a real bitch, you know, or like, oh wow, yeah, he looks like a good looking, he could be a model, but he looks like such a cunt. Do you know what I mean? Like they are those people that you knew at uni, or you knew like in pubs and bars and stuff. You just get a feeling about. I don't think they're very likable, and I don't think they would be successful as. Like, imagine, like, Raab's got this NDA that nobody fucking knows what it's covering up, what it's wrapping up. Patel's been not convicted, but, you know, found guilty of bullying. Both of them are completely unsuitable. Say again?
By Johnson, because he did the whole kind of bury it, don't let anyone see it thing, didn't he?
Yeah.
Which he does with virtually everything.
He considered the matter closed.
Like, he considered the Hancock matter closed, and then tried to gaslight everyone into saying he sacked him, and it was just like,
yeah, bellend.
Sweet mother of God, like, when will this end? Like, the problem is though, like, most people are too busy worrying about surviving a pandemic, putting food on their table, being overworked, underpaid. They don't necessarily immerse themselves in politics like day to day. Most people don't, so they tend to go on. I think that's another thing that's contributed to the rise of populism, is the fact that people are just not engaged with politics. They're too busy just trying to survive after 11 years of crushing Tory bullshit, really. So I have sympathy. I don't think anyone that's not politically engaged are, you know, idiots.
No.
Or anything like that. I just think that people are just trying to get on the best they can. Under all this nonsense.
I think you're right. I think I've said this on a couple of episodes before, but it's like most people do not obsess over this sort of stuff. However active Twitter gets and however active the comment sections get, most people just want to go into work, clear their emails, come home, make sure their kids have had a bath and a bedtime story, and then they want to, you know, catch up with their cousin or their aunts and stuff, and
watch a bit of telly.
Yeah, and they haven't got time to digest paragraph upon paragraph of the nuances and complexities of things like COVID and or Brexit. And so for them, the simple 3-word sloganeering that's become trademark of the Tory party and, you know, STEM newspapers over the last few years, is all they need. They just want a quick bite-sized chunk of what's going on and who to blame.
Yeah.
And this period of politics and media serves that up to them perfectly. I don't know how you...
Always has, hasn't it? That's the thing. It always has, except before there was kind of equal. There was more kind of, it was well, everyone got the piss taken out of them before. There's always been teams that are very pro right, very pro left, but a lot of them have changed sides now, and I think we've only got, what is it, the Mirror, and ironically the Star, which I read sometimes just for the comedy, the pure comedy.
Right.
Some of the headlines are genius. It's a bit like a tabloid Viz.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, is it the Star? No, the Sport. Is it the Sport or the Star? One of them. They're pretty much similar. They're both kind of full of knockers, aren't they? Really?
Yeah, like the Sport's the one that my friends post in the chat group every now and then, and it will say like fucking ridiculous, obvious bullshit. Like, I put 1,000 Pringles up my bum and my bell end explode. Like stuff like that. It's like, fucking hell. Can you? And I bet it's an Oxbridge graduate that wrote it, like wanted to be a journalist, did English lit, politics, yeah, ended up working at the Star writing about fucking nonsense. Like, what a life.
Were they the sex? Because I did a video about the sex arse tycoon who got stuck at Calais with all his sex arses. I'm certain that was the Star or the Sport. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
But they're the people that are actually calling Johnson a clown, you know.
Yeah.
Like, they're the people that are kind of ripping him a new one. And then you've got the Mirror. Everything else, or you got the Guardian, who are pretty balanced. They don't go as far as to call him a C unit, but they will kind of use quite, you know, disparaging language about him.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's
feel
they're not.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to ask, do you feel like there is a notable absence of like repercussions and shame? Like, has that shifted in the last like even 10 years? Because it feels like to me that if there were a government 10 years ago that was this obviously corrupt and had scandal after scandal, I mean, you can pick any fucking week of the last year and there's been some sort of sackable or like
every day.
Yeah.
Like I've struggled to know what to make a video about because it's like, oh, I've got a bloody list. It's like spinning plates.
It's pick a mix, right? Like walk in the sweet shop. What? Oh, which one shall I? How could I possibly choose?
Exactly.
And it feels like something's changed. Is that your take as well? You feel like why? Like what? How is it this corrupt at this moment and nothing seems to happen?
I think there's a cultural malaise. I think the fact that they're doing this during one of the worst national crises that we've ever had, like they're robbing us blind under the cover of, you know, death tolls. They're using death tolls to hide it. I mean, that is the worst, like most amoral thing that I can imagine is stealing our taxpayers' money whilst we are dying. I mean, they're just no better. Yeah, and using bloody burner phones to hide it,
right.
Like some bloody county lines drug dealer. Like they're like roadmen. Yeah. Except like in bloody posh suits with massive salaries, but yet they're not broke. So they get away with it. There's no accountability. But I think it's the fact that I don't think the public are seeing the half of it, and they're not seeking it out because, as we say, they've got other things going on. You know, they're either too busy during the last year and a half burying their loved ones, grieving, trying to worry about whether or not they're going to keep their job, their business is failing because Johnson locked down too late. Didn't close the borders, so it ran rampant. You know, he could have stopped this much earlier than he did. So I think people are just not getting the information, and they're probably a bit too distracted by other things, the things they're told to focus on, to necessarily seek it out. unless it appears in a meme format or something really accessible on social media. And a lot of that just tends to be misinformation about COVID or the government.
Yeah.
So,
Or hidden behind an algorithm, or
or hidden behind it out. I mean, look at the election campaign. I mean, that was a campaign in 2019, one on pure misinformation, much like Brexit, to a criminal level. Like 88% of Tory ads were dishonest compared to none of Labour's. It was a totally unfair fight. And there was someone was talking on the news today about the things that tip the balance against them tends to be things that are unfair, like Johnson not isolating, like or rule breaking. It's a bit like queue jumping. They tend to be the things that I think get people pissed off.
Yeah.
So if we could have a little bit more of that, it might chip away a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, this is the take I have on the current cabinet, or the current sort of flock of MPs. Is it seemed to me as though there was a purge of credible, experienced, proven politicians in the Tory party.
Well, yeah, there was.
Yeah, right. So they ostracized and outed and deselected, as I say, like proven politicians who could have applied a bit of intelligence, logic, and experience around complex situations like Brexit and COVID.
Yeah.
Now, in the absence of those figures, what you have is a cabinet full of yes men and careerists. And now where we're at is we're in a situation where we've got Brexit coming in from this side and COVID coming in from this side, incredibly complex problems that need calm, cool heads who look at things logically and on a long-term kind of level, not short-termist panic, like reactive politicking.
Or how can we look better being the main priority?
Exactly. Yeah. So on like the downside to that is that you have these sort of chaotic decision makings and like U-turns and but the upside to that from a left leaning perspective is that they will sequentially consistently fuck up because they're so shit. Like they've just all of these ministers have been hired on the basis that either they know somebody like Carrie Johnson, or that they said yes, they love Brexit. Even the ministers who previously campaigned against Brexit suddenly then said, oh, actually what I meant to say was I love Brexit and I love you, Boris, please can I have a job? So
yeah, please can I have all the lovely expenses.
So when you get a cabinet full of ferociously low caliber ministers like this, they can't help but fuck up. It's in their nature. They are over promoted Peter Principle cunts, and so on the back of that, it's a good time in a fucked up way for the left of British politics, because there will be these messy like like where they're completely detached from normal people, and people like Johnson and Rishi. His surname escaped me. Rishi Sunak. Sorry. I was so conscious, like I was thinking, what's his surname? I don't want to just use the first name again now. People like Johnson and Sunak, it would not even occur to them that they have to stick to the rules because they're so used to not having to stick to fucking rules. So off the back of that, then, there will be more of that sort of situation, and it will irk people because it's like that whole thing about one rule for them, another for everyone else is a great line to go to market with for Labour because it lands and it fucks people off like you just said.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and I think it's beginning to cut through, and I really hope it is. But then I do bash my head against a brick wall for many reasons. But I get so infuriated with some factions of the left because I don't think. I mean, it's like they're too busy squabbling over little things, not realising like, oh, well, this is what they did to Corbyn was terrible. Yeah, I fucking agree what they did to Corbyn was terrible, but it's what every single party does, and it's the way that they're always ousting people for a better, because they want to promote this or that, or they want a different style to come across. It's a tale as old as time. It's always been done. But yet this obsession with the moral aspect of it is only something that seems to infiltrate Labour, the Tories will do it without a second thought. Their voters won't give a shit about it. They'll get voted in. And whilst, you know, Corbyn was stitched up, but also he also stitched himself up by being a bit of an arrogant shit at times. He's a good man, admittedly, but it's going to hold us back focusing on the past like this. It's going to just, as I've said before, bend over and wave in successive Tory governments. The past is irrelevant. Starmer's not I don't love the man. Like, he's not my first choice for anything, but he's not a bad leader. And he's not a bad guy. He's when you've got a QC against a guy that's killed 150,000 people, and they're going, oh, I don't know if I could trust him. You know that the Tories have systematically undermined facts, to an alarming point.
I sort of feel like I have some sympathy with people, more so now than I did when Starmer first took the leader of opposition role. Because immediately straight out the gate there were people like Corbynistas giving him a hard time and talking him down, and it enrages people like you and I, because I'm like, I voted for Corbyn. I supported Labour on the basis that they were the largest party and that they were the most likely to oust the Tories. And I always look at it from a sort of pragmatic, practical perspective, where I'm like, get the left of centre party in, and then form lobbying groups within it, a bit like the Tories do with the ERG, and then, you know, make your case and all work together in this one broad church, right? This idea that Labour should be this sort of this church of Corbynism, and that is like only that puritanical take on Labour can possibly be accepted, and therefore now this, you know, guy in a nice suit has taken the leader of opposition role. Well, I don't know if I can vote for him. No, like it just seems so self-defeating and short-termist. There's stuff about Starmer that I accept that people have an issue with, and it does seem as though when there are certain individuals within the Labour Party who get into a spot of bother, he's incredibly sluggish to support them, right?
Absolutely.
I get that. But that doesn't mean, like, why are we focusing on Starmer the person? Can we just focus, like, regroup, focus on the common goal, and then have a word with Starmer at some point in the future? You know?
Absolutely, and it overrides the brilliant things that Labour MPs are doing. And there's some brilliant Labour MP. Look at Dawn Butler. Look at Zara Sultana. I mean, what Dawn Butler did was brilliant, and then it was overshadowed by people that are supposed to be on that team. Instead of bigging up the achievement, they were going, oh well, why hasn't Starmer come out? It's like, what Starmer's doing about this is irrelevant. He hasn't condemned her. He actually came out and said he supported what she did. But he can't be seen as the leader of the opposition who is consistently hounded for, I don't know, you know, anything they can throw at him. Why focus on him and his reaction to what she did? Her achievement, they're all on the same team.
Yeah. It's
not Starmer versus his cabinet. They're all doing the same thing. And how do you know that he didn't agree to that anyway? Like, but he can't be, you know, there isn't like a plan. So I think there's definitely something between Starmer and Blackford. I mean, I'm not talking like emotionally. I'm talking.
You're not talking Gove and his spad. You're not talking Gove and his spad. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but.
Oh no.
Maybe I'll bleep that out on the re-upload. Carry on.
Yeah. We're going to get Diana'd without a doubt. But the thing is, like, just get the left in, sort out all that shit after.
Yeah.
Like, unite behind. Like, if you don't like Starmer as a leader, get in, replace him at some point. Like, you know, we've talked before about how he'd be a good foreign secretary, etc.
Yeah.
But this whole, like, they're always like, oh, we've got to get in a new Labour MP, like new Labour leader every 5 minutes. That makes us look weak and it undermines our position. Yeah. You need something consistent. And also him, sorry, I just had to get a mosquito because they will try and kill me. I've totally lost what I was going to say now. Starmer, get them in. Oh, fuck.
Have you had a brain fart?
It distracted me because they will bring me out in massive welts.
It's MI5, man. They're sending in mozzies to brain fart you.
Oh yeah, it's bad enough that the pigeons are remote controlled nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I was gonna ask you earlier. So, like you said, did you say like he would like Starmer wouldn't be your first choice, or you don't think he's perfect? Or, but who do you think? Is there somebody in the Labour Party where you're like, yes, that's my guy or that's my woman? Like, get this person in. No,
because no, there isn't. I think Starmer was. He is the elected leader. You get behind him. Like I'm thinking in very binary terms because we're in an emergency situation. We've got an absolute fucking nutter running the country, and he's evidently a better choice. How left he is frankly irrelevant at this point, because you're not going to go from the kind of pretty like the further left-wing policies of Corbyn. I don't like the term far left because I don't think that's what Corbyn was. He was just socialist. You're not going to go from him to from populism, like proper right-wing populism, to the far left overnight. You've got to have some middle ground and balance. And centrist isn't a dirty word. Like everyone hates the centrists, the right and the left, but it's the Labour have never been a centrist party. They've always been left to centre left. So it just how people think we're going to get from the madness that we're in now to suddenly being like waving the red flag, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's totally it's cloud cuckoo land thinking. We need pragmatism and we need some common sense. And it just seems like some facets of the left now are believing the bullshit. They're entering the post-truth nonsense. They're making up shit about the leader of the opposition, when in most cases that's our way out of this. It's like I refer to it as pissing on your own shoes because that's what it is.
Yeah,
it's just, there's no sense in it.
You're right. It's two cheeks of the same arse, isn't it? On the right hand side of the political landscape, you've got the authoritarianism and the post-truth and the We Love Boris Club, and then on the left you have the sort of super support of Corbyn, even though now he's in the history books, guys. Like, we need to move on. Like, this is and it's this feeling that nothing is ever far left enough, and that centrist is a dirty word, as you touched on, and that we need to stay true to the socialist roots and so on. For me, it's like it's going to sound a bit cunty saying this, but I feel like whether you're on the far right of things and you're talking about, I'd fucking shoot a harpoon into their dinghies, fuck them, or if you're on the left and you're saying shit like, no, like we should be a fully far left socialist government and everyone should get a free iPad and I don't know, whatever the other like far left socialist tropes are. An
uplit picture of Corbyn in a gilt frame.
Right,
in every lounge.
Everyone has to have a Che Guevara tattoo on the left arm.
A free beret for all.
Yeah. Am I having a brain fart now? Has it completely left my head? See, maybe it's the MI5 mozzies have just like landed on my head as well.
I interrupted you. So you've said you've got the two sides of the coin there.
Yeah. And it's completely left my head.
We're both doing it. Like, bear with us, everyone, because he's recovering from Rona. Yeah. I'm recovering from carbon monoxide poisoning. Oh, it's a miracle we're alive. Yeah. At least.
I've remembered. Right. So is it right, this is what's cunty. Is it ego in the sense that it's a more self-flattering tale to tell yourself that you are this socialist warrior that's fighting for the cause and you know what's best and everyone would be better off with a super socialist government with Corbyn at the helm? That is a nice tale to tell yourself because then you get to be the warrior. And on the right-hand side of it, it's like you get to tell yourself that you're this like, Britain loving, flag fucking weird, like it's like defending the honor, but it's quite a boring tale for you and I to tell ourselves. It's like, look, I just want to sit in the center ground, and I think there's some things that we need to be a little bit perhaps a bit more conservative about with a small c, and there's some things that we need to lean a little bit left and be a bit more socially conscious about and look after people on a societal level on this side. Like that is a boring tale to tell yourself. It's not as ego-y. And so is it that basically? Is that what it comes down to?
I don't know, because I wouldn't call myself a centrist. I've always been a left winger, and you get people on the left calling you a dirty centrist every time you just logically support the leader of the opposition because the government are mental. Like
I see, right.
and they use. But I really agree with some centrist policies, some, but I am more left wing. But I'm not kind of you know, I don't think all aspects of socialism will work whilst we've still got a kind of really capitalist society. I just don't think it's logical. I just don't think that's going to work. So it's about trying to, but I think you've got to gently catch your monkey with left policy. Because I was talking to John, left of the countryside, about this the other day, and Davey Moon, and we were saying we need to, gently find a way to sell these policies to people, because most people need and want the more kind of left-wing Labour policies. Like, people would benefit from them massively. But then there's this whole thing that's been seeded by the Tories for years, which is that Labour can't manage the finances. There's still that lie that Labour, and it was a lie, that Labour left everything bare. They didn't. A global financial crash ruined everything. I mean, the end of the last Labour government was a shambles, don't get me wrong. And a lot of the northern communities were hugely let down by the last Labour government, like they were towards the end of it. But they'd been in power for years at that point. But in many ways, the country did prosper. But I still don't think people should be wheeling out Blair as some kind of, I keep seeing his interviews everywhere, and it makes me want to, bash my head off the wall, because the guy is not an authority on what's good for Labour now. I think any association with him's harmful.
Yeah. Do you think it's just sort of a different time? Like he came to the fore at a time when the country was in this position, and actually right now we're facing these challenges, so he's not actually qualified? Or do you think it's like he's just kind of like he's flushed his credibility down the toilet with Iraq and
toilet? He committed war crimes. The guy's an arsehole for that. He did, like, his cabinet did do some good, like a lot of good for the country prior to that, but in the end he fucked it. He fucked it. He missed the penalty, but on a scale where, like, what I think about with the 90s and Labour is that people in England slept soundly during that time. Hundreds of thousands of people died in the Middle East, and it started this whole nightmare that's still affecting us today. It perpetuated that nightmare. So it's hard to feel good about the good things that Labour did when in the end they killed loads of people unnecessarily. That's what I find difficult to reconcile. But it's a totally new game now. It's a totally different world now, and I am vehemently pro-Labour because they're our biggest opposition party, and in most constituencies they are the opposition to the Tories. Not in all though, because there's regional differences, but I think it is a totally different world now. But again, how we're going to battle a government that's seeded a mistrust of sense and experts, I really am struggling to think about how to counteract that.
Yeah, I think when Blair came to the fore, I think two things were different. First, there was no social media, obviously, which completely changed the game, as we know. You can pick one of 1,000 documentaries out there about how Facebook ads and so on have changed the landscape of politics. But I also think what Blair did have then that is the same kind of ish now that Starmer could do is try to get the Sun on board and try to get the Murdoch empire on board. Now, look, I'm not a fan of Rupert Murdoch by a long shot, but I think in a pragmatic way, and I accept I'm going to open myself up to some level of abuse for this, but I think when you've got a broadcast empire, a media empire of that size, putting out messaging against you and against your interests, if you want to get in power, maybe the ugly truth is that you actually need to get them on side. And I don't know how you do that if you're Keir Starmer, or whoever the next leader is when they oust him, but I would imagine and hope that that's probably top on their priority list. Though I've never seen, I mean, look, I don't read The Sun, but I've not seen or heard of anything from Keir Starmer's PR office appearing in The Sun. Do you know, like, off the top of, like, have you seen any like feature by Keir Starmer in The Sun yet? Or
I would not read that paper if you paid me, but I tend to see headlines mentioned out on Twitter. But I don't think so. I mean, I think there's been a lot of kind of a few of the broadsheets have, I think. As have a few of the people like the Guardian. I think the Telegraph have, the Times have. I know the Times. I think it was the Times that featured one of Jess Phillips' self-congratulatory interviews.
She's another one that gets a lot of hate.
Well, I don't think that she is helpful in any respect.
Really?
No, I don't. I think that she is more focused on her own achievements than making change, personally. I mean, I think she's done a lot of good for speaking out about women's issues, especially about male violence towards women. I think that's been a really positive aspect of Jess Phillips, but she strikes me as someone that's quite self-obsessed, sadly.
Really?
Well, only based on what I've seen, that could be a premature judgment. So I'm not a fan of Jess Phillips, but I'm a fan of a lot of the Labour MPs because they're good humans. I mean, my local candidate, Tina, she forfeited her MP salary because she felt it was like too high. So she took just a standard living wage out of her salary. So, you know, you don't get that on the right. I don't think you get that on the right as often.
Doesn't seem that way, does it? What you actually
but then
get,
people don't notice.
No. And that's the thing, like, it sort of brings me back to The Sun and the Murdoch empire, is that you can be very noble and surrender your salary, but what good does it do if actually the way that gets reported is that Tina did this or Tina did that and the great heroic Tory guy did that? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's all about the messaging.
No.
I don't
know what you can do because essentially that guy pulls all the strings. Well, that guy in Russia, it seems Russia had a big part in our democracy. That they influenced the elections, they influenced Brexit. Apparently, allegedly. I'll say that before I get bloody Villanelle turning up at my house.
Mosquito pigeon bombed. Yeah.
Well, you know, any way they can. So that's, I don't know, like cozying up to Murdoch. I know that's something that Jess Phillips has been doing. To some extent, it makes sense, but we need to get to a point where there aren't media monopolies, where people like a few people aren't running everything and all the information that we receive, because we all know information's power. And if they're controlling the information that people see, it's and it affects our democracy. It's just not democratic. We don't have a democracy, do we, if that's the case? So it's terrifying. I don't know really if infiltrating that's the right idea. Ideally, get rid of them, but I don't think that's something that you can easily do, is it, when one man controls vast amounts of information that's going out to the public?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see the Sun's whopping offices shut for good. I mean, I'm sure there's a place for fun red top tabloid journalism if it's just, arguably harmless stuff, like a little bit of celebrity gossip, and showbiz interviews with whoever the big pop star is that week, and then a big thing about the footy for the last 10 pages, and I understand that there's a demand for fairly, and I sound very elitist when I say this, but like fairly brainless non-journalism, where you just want something to read on your lunch break, like I just want to sit here.
Well, make it like Women's Own then, don't call it don't call it a newspaper. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But what they did to Corbyn was unforgivable.
Yeah.
And it was
Ed Miliband as well, same treatment.
Ed Miliband. I mean, it is so blatant. I mean, they're just trying to undermine these people, and a lot of it's lies. I mean, and you look at people like the Daily Mail, who will run the most sensationalist headline you can imagine, and then that will stick in people's minds, and then you'll see the tiny retraction a couple of weeks later at the very back, and it's not enough. Like, they should be front page, we bullshitted. There should be, I don't know if you can,
about the sex asses. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, what aren't they telling us about the sex asses? This is the shit we need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, that poor sex ass tycoon, man, stuck at Calais because, Project Fear.
Yeah.
He was stuck there. That's why we've got all the lack of lorries, isn't it? Project Fear. That's why those buses are on fire in Ireland.
Yeah, it's why I can't get my sex asses. It's.
I know, man. Why don't they think about people like you that just crying out for a sex ass?
Yeah.
I know.
Sad about my absence of sex toys and. Yeah. Fucking Brexit.
I know. It's letting us all down.
Yeah, I don't know, man. If I look at the Tory government as is, and I look at the last 12 months, right, and I think about Johnson overlooking Patel's bullying report, just ignoring it. I look at
made it go away, didn't he?
Yeah, the burner phones. This is a big thing at the moment.
Fucking hell, I know.
Who fucking has burner phones apart
criminals?
From... Yeah,
that's who has burner phones.
It's like if your wife or your husband comes home with 2 phones, immediately you'd be like, either you're cheating on me or you're up to something fucking shady. What are you doing?
Or you're dealing some gack out to Gove. I mean, what is it? I mean, yeah.
I look at the dodgy PPE deals. I look at all the stuff that the Good Law Project are working on. I look at what else has been in the news recently? 25 grand. Russia. 25 grand of Russian money donated to Raab's office.
Tip of the iceberg, eh?
Right.
Tip of the iceberg.
And they don't want to investigate Russian interference in the Tory party. And I
wonder why.
Yeah. And I look at the Tory party as is, and I think how did it get this fucked, where a Western liberal democracy is in such dire straits and so frustrated, where there's no obvious recourse, there's no way to get it back on track, there's no, like, I assumed in my political naivety, and remember, I'm not a politics grad, I'm not a journalist, I assumed that in my armchair expertise of this, that there would be certain checks and balances, right? That if politicians stepped out of line, that they would be hauled over the coals, that they would be ejected from power, that parties would be reprimanded or banned even, or they would have the funding cut off. I assumed that there was those processes and controls in place, and that if they weren't in place, that there would be, I don't know, some other kind of repercussions for that party, like the media would hold them to account in the same way that the Murdoch media held John Major's government to account and made life very difficult for them. I never dreamed in a million years that you would have a populist government who professed to being sort of libertarians and defenders of freedom, but who would then threaten to imprison journalists and criminalize protest. And I read this article on, I think it was on Human Rights Watch. Humans. Sorry, I can't talk now. I've had like 1.5 beers. I'm talking like I've had 7. Human Rights Watch, I think, and this guy compared the slow deletion of rights and democracy and freedoms to a frog slowly being boiling alive
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the like nail on the head there. It's like people don't fucking realize what's going on as we slide effortlessly with barely any challenge at all into this kind of fascism light authoritarianism. And it sounds hysterical.
It creeps in.
Yeah, like I know how that sounds, like those words coming out of my mouth. It sounds hysterical. And I don't want to say those things and sound...
It's not hysterical. We fit all the signs of fascism, like every single one. There's evidence for every single one. That's not hysterical. Like a lot of people used to think you were hysterical for comparing the Conservative Party to Hitler. Not anymore. Like, not anymore. I mean, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I often sit there and think, how the hell have we got to this point? But it has been a slow boil, and that's a metaphor that I use a lot, that I've been familiar with for a few years now. And it started with, gradually seeding into people to not believe what they were seeing. It's the double speak. It's the gaslighting. And, you know, what they're doing with the covering up. I mean, the covering up of really important investigations, they've been doing it for years. I mean, look at Theresa May with the the child abuse scandal papers. They were just suddenly lost. Nothing's really entirely lost unless you set on fire your hard drive and dump it in a quarry. So that's bullshit. But I fear what they're gonna. Not that I've had to do that.
That sounded so specific, though. It's like
I'm not Prince Andrew. Like, but what I'm thinking is like they're gonna do this. The cover-ups. I mean, using fucking WhatsApp for political business in itself is unbelievable. It's encrypted, so they're trying to hide it. They're trying to hide any scrutiny. They're protecting us against any transparent investigation of what they're doing. And they'll do the same with the COVID inquiry. There's no coincidence that they're trying to cover up, that they're trying to like delay the COVID inquiry, because what they'll do is they'll drag it out like they did with the Grenfell inquiry, which is still going on, to the point where it's no longer daily news. It's just something that people just think, oh, is that still happening? Horrific tragedy, entirely preventable. And they'll blame us, the public, the NHS, the carers, just like they blamed the firefighters for Grenfell. It is disgusting. You know, the firefighters didn't make those buildings combustible. They didn't fail to replace the sprinklers. Same applies to COVID. So they're just covering their tracks. And because they're rich white men, they're going to get away with it and not be seen as criminals, when, as I said, they're no better than a petty drug dealer at this point, trying to siphon off money in a shady way. And they wouldn't have these burner phones. They wouldn't be doing it by an encrypted method instead of through their official emails if they had nothing to hide. It's a monumental scandal, and it's one of hundreds that the Tories have played out this year alone. Yeah. So how do you overcome that? I mean, will morality overcome that? Possibly not. I don't know what the answer is to it, Aid. It's a mess.
Here's my pathway to a better world, right? Starmer goes for dinner with Rupert Murdoch. The two of them hit it off. They talk about whatever the fuck they've got in common, which is nothing, but they I don't know, they talk about something. And I think Starmer likes football. Is he an Arsenal fan? But
he's definitely a footy fan.
Maybe there's something there that they can talk about. Oh, do you like football? Yeah, I love football. Ah, there we go. Best friends. Right. So what, with
Murdoch? Are you joking? He's like Mr. Burns.
Well, I don't know. Like Murdoch lived in the UK for a while, right? Quite a while. So I'm thinking he's probably into football culture. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, look, he wins over Murdoch, then he wins the next election. And then it's the end of post-truth, and there is some accountability because it's a Labour-led inquiry or something along those lines. That's my hope, but I appreciate I am living in fucking unicorn rainbow land.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting theory. I mean, I've got a theory on it, but I don't know if it's a bit too outlandish, really.
Go on.
What I think is you know how it's become like X Factory with all the politicians, like
Yeah.
pick a populist. Oh, he got stuck on a zip wire. He's so funny. Oh, but you know, he killed my nan, but he's brilliant. Let's have a drink with him.
Yeah.
I think we should set up a Love Island
Oh, right.
type show
Yeah.
with a Labour leader, a Tory leader, or associate and associated MPs from like the front bench, okay, and they've got to graft their constituents.
Wow.
and the ones that don't have game, they just get ejected off, right? But then you've got people in there that are claiming to be left wing when they're right wing, and so yeah. I think it's legs.
I like it.
In my head, I had that thought when I was all gassed up. I was thinking, you know, on all the old carbo mono, I was like, what if we did an But obviously, that's not a real solution.
But we're not far off from that. I mean, it's largely personality led at this stage, isn't it?
Of course it is. I mean, it's kind of like that. Just shows the point that we're at, like where. But you can't put Johnson on Love Island. He'd just try to fuck everything, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you like, obviously it wouldn't be called Love Island, and politicians are significantly less attractive than the contestants on Love Island. But I still have no doubt that, after a couple of weeks.
But it's not going to be like necessarily they're trying to shag them. It'd be like a kind of like trying to an ideological Love Island. I don't even know what you could call it.
I don't know either. But I hope.
I don't think it's a good idea, personally. I think that's something that's like a 3 a.m. Valiumed up carbon monoxide thought. But I was just thinking that. But it raises the point though about how that's what it's become. It's become he's such a laugh, and they don't see the reality of it, or they're not immersed enough in politics, so they go based on shoes or a suit or whether or not someone can eat a fucking bacon sandwich. You know, that's what it's come down to.
This is the whole thing with like con men, right? Is you how many fucking times did little old ladies let good-looking young men into their house because he seemed so nice and he knew what he was talking about with the like double glazing and everything, and you know, I thought like I made him a cup of tea and he was anyway. Then it looks like he's changed the zero on my thing, and now I've like he's charged me 100,000 back, like, and you like it's this thing about like, oh well, Boris Johnson seems like a sort of, you know, fun, good, what's the phrase, like good time Jack or whatever it is, like he seems like somebody you would want. And I know we said this before on the last episode and you said fucking no way, but I said like he seems like somebody that you could have a beer with and a bit of a joke, right? And you said no fucking way would I have a beer with him. But I think he survives the beer test, which is my personal qualifier for who I think, not who I love, but who I think will win the next election, right?
Yeah.
And Corbyn did not survive the beer test at all. Johnson does, because he's sort of, you know, upbeat and jokey and what's the word? Bonhomie? Bonhomie?
Bonhomie, like he's got
right?
He's got that, yeah.
So there's and you know, we can talk shit about him all day, but the guy does have political charisma and wit.
But that's not the real Johnson, though.
No, here's my next point is that this is the whole thing with fucking psychopaths, is that they're the life and soul of the party. And this is exactly the sort of person that you do not want running the country. You actually want somebody kind of boring and a little bit, you know, not life and like somebody who's thinking about things logically and who's looking at problems in a problem solving way, not in a kind of poll led populist fashion. You need a John Major. You need for all his mistakes, you kind of need a Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown was actually all right, you know, and even John Major's looking better nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you dug up fucking Thatcher and reanimated her, I think she'd be better than what they're doing at the moment. I mean, that you've even got Tories right now that are disgusted, especially with the foreign aid thing. And when even like Tories, even the Tories that they've not ousted are going, fuck, this is bad. Like you're going to literally kill millions of people.
But the problem is that, and this is what winds me up, and I suspect that this is a sensibility that is shared en masse across the left and probably some of the right, is that you will get people on the right, you will get card-carrying Tories who will say, I'm not down with this, like threatening to imprison journalists, and I'm sorry, I'm a libertarian at heart, and I am not okay with criminalizing protest, etc., etc. Well, this is where I draw the line. I'm not okay with this. And then they stand up there in the House of Commons and go, well, with reluctance, I will support the government. Like, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Where are your principles? Like, if this
they
is...
toe the line.
Yeah,
they do. Because they've got a fat salary and they've got like loads of benefits to being it. I mean, they are the biggest benefit scroungers in the country, are many of the politicians. So
yeah,
I mean, it's the same. The thing about like what you were talking about Brexit is because Brexiters hate Brexit. And I think it's because none of them actually agreed or knew what it entailed. No. So everyone's got this vision in their head of their own tailored version of what it is. And very little of what it was about leaving the EU anyway. So I think the fact that no matter what Johnson did, he was never going to please many Brexiters. No. He was never going to please them. So in a way, I've kind of at times chuckled because he's walked into a totally lost battle, whatever he does. And have you seen a lot of people talking about how this isn't my Brexit, he's a charlatan? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, what is your Brexit, mate? Like, when you ask people why they voted leave, they can very rarely tell you coherently why. So he was always going to lose with what he did with Brexit. But do you think that would be enough for him to... or for the Tories to lose an election based on what they've done? Because I think we're literally weeks away now from our supply chain being fucked beyond repair for a while. Yeah,
it depends how it's reported in the STEM papers. I know I sort of keep going back to media, but
you're right.
It is all about messaging, and it's how that information finds its way into your uncle or your dad's head. And I have this great fear that, I mean, if I look at the information that I have today to hand to inform my projection and my prediction for how things are going to turn out in 12 weeks time or 6 months time, everything tells me that it will be distorted and contorted and marketed and tabled back to your uncle or dad in a way that makes it look like it's the EU's fault or it's COVID's fault. And they're
already doing that. Carol Malone, right. Idiot.
Yeah, so it's like, if I look at the Express over the last couple of weeks, there was a thing about the freedom of movement. Like they suddenly said that they were shocked that the EU were asking for visas, which cost money, for us to go back onto the continent, right? This was apparently a huge shock to everyone, at Carol Malone included, that you might have to pay for a visa like you would do to fucking America or anywhere that you don't have freedom of movement sorted out. So, and the way that the Express marketed this and pushed it back on their readership was that it was an EU punishment back on Britain for Brexit. It was the EU being vindictive and mean. And it's like the thing that astounds me with this is these are fucking journalists. Like, these are people who take this fact and then this person's opinion and that person, and they amalgamate it all, and then they're supposed to come to a conclusion that is at that time thought to be the truth. And yet this fucking economist or this fucking like political journalist have got together and taken all those facts and figures together and opinions and whatever, and then completely gone, it's probably against the editorial line. Maybe we'll just say this other thing. Like, it's such horseshit, and it's so amazing and astounding to me that they can put in those 1,000 words to the editor, and the editor doesn't immediately go, "You're fucking fired. What are you doing? Like, you're you're supposed to tell the truth. You're supposed to get to the facts." So I think if that is some sort of indication as to where we're headed, I imagine that they will blame it on the French frustrating the border, or
of course they will,
or they will say that it's COVID, that there's a Delta variant or Delta Plus variant that's making it harder to come in. I bet my faith for the British media and the British electorate at this stage is through the fucking floor.
Same. But but the thing is though, you've got the editor or the person putting this out is probably mates with a Tory. I mean, that's. I mean, look at the old Emily Maitlis thing when she did that thing on Newsnight, which I've said gave me a bit of hope, because I was in the depths of a lockdown alone in winter, and it made me weep watching her say what I knew to be true. And all it took was a call from number 10. She's punished. She's her point is retracted. She's in trouble for saying something that's true because it's seen as going against the government. This is even before they've brought in some kind of law to make it. What they're trying to do is frighten and inhibit the truth, like frighten journalists, inhibit the truth, and get them to a point where they're second guessing whether or not they say anything, when already there is a massive monopoly in terms of the right wing coming out smelling roses in virtually every article that's written. In most right-wing media, but then that's predominantly read by Tory voters, isn't it? I guess.
But this is the sort of point I keep coming back to on this podcast, is that it is not enough. Like, it's easy to dismiss the dominance of right-wing newspapers on the basis that, well, yeah, only Tories buy the Sun, only Tories buy the Mail, so who are you really, what's the damage really if they put out some nonsense about Starmer or whoever. But it is the tone that is set at the beginning of the day when the Sun, the Telegraph, the Express and the Mail all go in on Labour or attack or glorify the Tories or whatever, that then on Sky News and BBC News and GB News, I assume, that all of these news channels start off their day with a what the papers say section.
Absolutely.
And because so much of the right wing, because so much of the newspaper press, because so much of the press, really can't talk, is right wing. That sets the tone, that sets the agenda. All of these news shows start doing little pieces and vox pops based on the headlines of that day. They'll say, the Sun have done a thing and they've done a poll that says this. What do you think about it? And then that becomes the fucking narrative for the rest of the day.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So it is too simplistic and dismissive to say, oh, well, some of the newspapers are right wing, but Sky News and BBC, oh, bloody left. It is not enough. The TV takes the lead from the newspapers, and that is what informs.
Correct.
People.
And then that also forms the subject for if there's any kind of political other TV program like Newsnight or etc.
Right.
Or Question Times, like that will be centered around that. So you're right. It's a circular thing, and it's terrifying. But then again, not all not all Tories read. It's not just those people that read the Times. I mean, my nan, bless her, she was taken in by Brexit, which broke my heart, but at the same time she'd never have considered herself right wing.
No.
And again, I've got family members that voted to leave that would never have voted Tory if you cut their hands off. You'd have to cut their hands off before they'd vote Tory. So it's difficult to draw kind of to generalize on that front, I think.
You're right. It's
but there's no doubt what you're saying is true. It's a circular thing. They all influence each other. And
where did did you say your grandmother or your mother?
My grandmother. She voted to leave, and it was a really heartbreaking moment because she is so clever, but she was a religious Mail reader. So that was a really tricky thing for me to come to terms with. But she was ridiculously clever. But I think, I mean, Farage has a lot to answer for. Like I can't I find it very difficult to talk about Farage without swearing.
Here's a weird question for you, right? And
Creatively,
this might have to be our closer because we've been talking for a while now. But do you think people like Farage and, let's say, Mark Francois, and not Boris Johnson, because this is too easy a question if we're talking about him.
Yeah.
But like Farage, Mark Francois, IDS, all of these sort of comfortably on the right Brexiteers, right? Do you think that they truly believe that Brexit is a great thing? Or do you think it's something colder and more cynical, and it just serves their purpose politically and media-wise at the moment? Where do you think they sit?
I think it's the latter, and I think that they're probably themselves being influenced by people bigger than themselves, not in a conspiracy theory way, but in a disaster capitalist way. And also there's a lot of ego. I think Farage, as O'Brien calls him, is trying to do it. I think he's just another person that's obsessed with being relevant, financially gaining, because obviously he was a shit MEP, and he still, tried to push to leave whilst he was on the gravy train taking in all the money. I think it's a lot to do with ego and financial benefit. Who or how, I don't think matters to people like them. He's just another, like Lawrence fucking Fox,
right.
They're people that are generally unsuccessful in all other aspects besides inciting idiots to support them. And there's no real community behind the people that support those people either. Not like there is on the left, which I think is our kind of winning. It's something that wins up, that gives us a benefit, I think, is the fact that there's a lot of community on the left. There's a lot of kind of common causes. It's just a vacuous emptiness in those people. And I think it is very much led by financial gain at any cost, really. I don't think if it wasn't Brexit, it would have been something else. But I think Brexit was a good front for their xenophobia and for their wanting to kind of incite something. I mean, look at the way he's got in bed with Trump, to the point where he's now a person of interest in Trump's in a legal action against Trump.
I think
so. I in a long-winded response to your question, I don't think it was. I think there was more to it than just Brexit, and I don't think even they knew what Brexit would entail.
I think you're probably broadly right. I think the only add-on to that I would contribute is I think for them it's become, in the same way that, I don't know, like for your uncle or your brother or whoever that gets it mad into Brexit or mad into anti-vax theories, I think for them it becomes a purpose. I think in the absence of purpose and direction in your life, and I don't mean that to sound sort of patronizing, but I really think there's an element of that to it where, like, you know what, if you're a failed actor, or if you're a failed MEP, or if you're a failed mechanic or fucking call center worker or whatever, and then you get involved in some internet forum or group or Facebook thing, and you feel like you're contributing to something, you feel listened to, and suddenly there's 150 people retweeting you and saying like, oh, listen to this guy, he fucking gets it. Like, I think there's a purpose there for the everyday Joe, if it's, like I say, like your uncle or your brother. But I think when it's somebody like Farage or Lawrence Fox or Francois, I think for them, these are low caliber individuals in their respective industries. And I think somebody like Lawrence Fox would have just, teetered on the periphery of bit parts and supporting roles and stuff. And I think Farage would have been a substandard MP if he, but
car salesman.
Yeah, but something like this, some sort of purpose or goal or narrative or slogan allows them to put themselves above that and appear to be some kind of oppressed, attacked messiah kind of figure. and
Yeah.
it becomes this like
Fake underdog,
yeah,
innit?
it's like I'm going up against the elite, or I used to be liberal, but you guys don't understand. Like, it's just, and it's always the same, and I see it across the political, like even with people like Alex Salmond. I feel like he's veered into that territory now. And the Corbynistas, it's the same. Like, it's the same sort of gene that's there. It's like this, that nothing is pure enough. Well, I'm going up against I'm going up against this part of the Labour Party, or I'm going. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's.
But it's never a worthy cause. Like, there's never a revolution for fucking sense or truth. It's always like a bunch of, like, as I've said before, it's a bunch of like middle-aged people trying to create some kind of like really shit Mad Max, except it just robs us all of like our freedoms. Well, us of our freedoms. They'll still have them because they're rich.
Yeah.
But it's there's never a revolution against a really corrupt government. It's always against something that's really bloody pointless.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's like Stanhope said, isn't it? Like Doug Stanhope. People want to feel a part of something, and so they pick a side.
Yeah.
And the side they pick depends on, largely, it seems nowadays, their prejudices, as opposed to something moral and something worth fighting for, in my opinion. So yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
What a proper riot, like, but in order to kind of create a better future for people, not to increase xenophobia and racism in the country and divide people.
But it's like that sort of that idea. I think this was written in the European press somewhere and then reported back in the UK. But it was somebody somewhere that I'm butchering the quote for, I'm sure, was saying like that people in Britain now seem to subscribe to this idea that things couldn't possibly ever be better. Like, this is as good as it gets, but things could be so much worse. Like we as a nation, we believe that everything could get really bad if a load of Turks join the EU and come over, or if a few more people come over in diggies, or we fear above all else that everything is about to change, that we're going to lose Britain. But we couldn't possibly ever imagine that the 40 billion that was spaffed away on test and trace could have been used to improve this service or that hospital or that school. Like, we never ever believed that. For us, it's just completely different currency.
Well, no, I mean, that money could have gone on feeding all the kids that Johnson's tried to starve. It could go on improving the hospitals that they're selling off. It could go on I don't know,
right?
Proper support for women of colour that suffer domestic violence,
Yeah.
It could go on all these things, but it doesn't. It just goes into the pockets of their friends.
Yeah.
And it's all hidden on burner phones. It's all hidden in personal email accounts.
Yeah.
And it's bullshit. And people need to stand up to it big time. But they don't. They just... I have no hope that they're gonna.
No. Doesn't seem like there's much appetite to riot at the moment, does there?
I'd love a riot though. Bloody hell! I feel like I've got it in me. I've got a megaphone. I feel I've got some DMs. I think I should. I'll be up for it.
I'm the least
should
likely.
I be saying that?
Like,
should I?
Socioeconomically speaking, I'm the least likely guy to riot because I've got 2 kids. I've got a mortgage. I've got a job I love. I don't need to, like, you would think there would be a part of like number 10 strategy and comms and everything that would advise and say, if you get more people into jobs, get them comfortable, get them into mortgages and so on, they're less likely to cause you problems, right?
Yeah.
But there doesn't seem to be any appetite to do that because the housing crisis, right? Like, it's fairly evidential that we're not trying to fix that problem. But anyway, that's a topic for a whole other podcast. So I'm going to have to love you and leave you there, Tan. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been a lot of fun. I could have carried on talking for another couple of hours, I'll be honest.
We probably shouldn't. It'll just get more depressing, won't it?
Right, yeah. Like the last hour of a 5-hour podcast with you and me would just both be the pair of us opening another drink, just going like...
We'll be on the heroin. It's like...
But yeah, if you've listened or watched this episode, please do like, subscribe, all that usual stuff that people say at the end of episodes of podcasts. The episodes are filmed on a Friday or Saturday night, but then put out on Spotify and iTunes the next day. And yeah, once again, thank you very much for my guest this week, Super Tanskiii. Nice sign up there. All right, thanks very much, guys.